here. So this is a critical note. So we're reading a book about another book. Kristen Gestall's The Drama of History, Ibsen, Hegel, and Nietzsche. So this is just a little review, and we're just gonna go take a look at this because I don't know. I know like of the name. I don't know exactly who they are. Yeah, so they're a playwright. Best known plays: A Doll's House, Ghost, Wildwick. Okay, yeah. So this is why I've heard him, but I don't actually know a lot about him. So yeah. Okay. So and this is a few pages. There'll be something to talk about. So let's find out. And yeah, ask questions, let me know. Kristen Gestall's The Drama of History, Ibsen, Hegel, Nietzsche is a rich exploration of Hegelian and Nietzschean themes in and throughout Ibsen's work. Ibsen was born shortly before Hegel's death. Excuse me. Ibsen was born shortly before Hegel's death and was a contemporary of Nietzsche. Some of Ibsen's best known plays, A Doll's House, Ghosts, The Wild Duck, premiered during Nietzsche's most active period of philosophical writing. Gestall's book is also a window onto Hegel and Nietzsche's 19th century reception in Scandinavia. Oh, that's right, he's a Scandinavian writer. And their place in literary and artistic circles. That said, Gestall's book is not just about charting influence. This makes the study especially interesting and philosophically rich. It asks what hermeneutic artistic possibilities were disclosed by the philosophical contributions at the time and how Ibsen as an artist makes use and often goes beyond them. Gestall reads the plays as taking up Hegelian and Nietzschean themes, yet complicating and challenging them in such a way as not only to have Hegel and Nietzsche shed light on Ibsen, but also to have Ibsen shed light on Hegel and Nietzsche. So this is interesting. So you've got like some sort of like a playwright's analysis of like the ideas going on in philosophy at the time. Two of the plays Gestall discusses will be less familiar to most audiences: The Vikings at Helgeland and The Emperor and Galilean, both works treating historical themes. It is Ibsen's bourgeois dramas set in the Norway of roughly his time that tend to be the popular stage mainstays now. The folkloric Peter Gynt is likely somewhere in between in terms of familiarity. Peer Gynt, not Peter. The Vikings at Helgeland take place in the 10th century and draws, as its name suggests, on the saga literature. The 19th century was a period of great interest in mythology, with this thought to be a route to better understand and make sense of one's identity and of the values that ground one's community. Yeah, I mean, if you look at, of course, Nietzsche was huge on this stuff. Like, what is it to be like mythos? And so everyone was drawing on this. During the same period as Ibsen was writing, Richard Wagner was at work on his monumental tetralogy, Der Ring der Nebel. I wish I knew German. Whatever, that German stuff, which also drew on Norse mythology. This turn to mythology came on the heels of the Sturm und Drang movement, in which these historical evocations of the past played an important role as well. Gestall allows that the play is, to some extent, a mythologizing endeavor and an expression of Sturm und Drang sentiments. But it is, on her reading, not simply a backwards-looking play, but one that speaks to our modern condition. It is indeed as though its central character, Hortus, faces the predicament of the modern subject. Her world is God-forsaken. Her very self, her identity and self-understanding emerges as hollow in the tradition she has previously taken for granted. Yeah, so she's living in like the post-Nietzschean sort of God is dead times. The turn towards the mythic and attempts at dramatizing this were in the 19th century also part and parcel of the attempt to demarcate and solidify distinct national identities. This again was a centerpiece of the Wagnerian program, coinciding as it did with the Grunderzeit, and it had important parallels in other countries. For example, Verdi with the Risorgimento in Italy. In the Scandinavian context, Norwegian national identity was relatively fragile, with present-day Norway having been in union first with Denmark, then with Sweden, as it was until the early 20th century. And if anyone doesn't know, you should go check out our friend Shane McGinnis, who just did a history of the Swedish Empire, where you got to find out exactly like Sweden was kicking some like serious ass for a long time and basically took over the whole area. And Denmark also had like, you know, different treaties. So like Denmark was in charge and then Sweden was in charge. And so Norway kind of, I'm sure they did their own stuff, but like Sweden had some like real kick-ass general kings that took over most of like huge amounts of space. They I mean, one of the idiots attempted to go after Moscow even. They had taken over all the land in Europe and were almost going towards Moscow. And of course, you do not fight a land war in Asia. And that person failed. Shane McGinnis. Let's see if I got that right. I did. Woo! So yeah, so that's probably in his VODs very recently, and you can go find out about this. Ha! Yeah. Well, we're talking about Sweden and Norway. So we're talking about Ibsen and Ibsen's relation to Nietzsche and Hegel. And Ibsen is a Scandinavian playwright, and so I was just saying, they were just commenting Norwegian national identity was relatively fragile, with present-day Norway having been in union first with Denmark, then with Sweden, as it was until the early 20th century. So I was just like saying, and if you want to learn more, you should go check out Shane's talk on the Swedish Empire from a few days back in the VODs. So, that's what I was doing. Yeah, so, welcome in, Shane. Although the play can seem to plant a flag for nascent Norwegian nationalism, Gestall reads it more as yeah, that was good stuff. Reads it more as more European in character and also more tentative. It is thus less the usual exercise in romantic mythologizing, but an investigation of its very possibility. It is as if the somewhat belated Sturm und Drang movement in Scandinavian art and letters enabled Ibsen in his early work to dramatize how this kind of paradigm bursts into its own boundaries and calls for an orientation toward selfhood and subjectivity that it itself enables but cannot fully encompass. Yeah, so it's looking like what Ibsen was doing was talking about nationalism in the more European context, even though it was like set in Norway. Peer Gynt has folkloric roots with elements of the quasi-picaresque, I don't know what that is, and the Bildungsroman, or whatever we might term its dramatic equivalent. In the play, Peer traverses diverse geographical regions from Norway to North Africa, specifically Morocco and Egypt, and encounters different people and cultures. Gestall reads the play in dialogue with Hegel's critique of romantic aestheticism and its attendant picture of subjectivity. Peer is a romantic aestheticizing character. He is playful and adventuresome, but also from the point of view of the Hegelian philosopher, irredeemably naive. To Peer, life remains a solo performance, and even history and tradition are the arenas of selfish pursuit and individual education. This individualistic idea of selfhood is to be contrasted with the conception of the self as constituted by its position in a community, and in particular by a kind of intersubjective recognition. Peer Gynt, also on Gestall's reading, engages with Hegel's conception of Egyptian art and culture. In the lectures on fine art, Hegel presents Egyptian art as static and deficient in spirit compared with Greek and later European art. Though Ibsen partly reproduces Hegel's picture of Egyptian culture, he also complicates and goes beyond it. Ibsen makes us consider the fallacies of individual and cultural narratives of self-sufficiency and supremacy. Ibsen, while not entirely distant from Hegel, uses Hegel resources to critique Hegel. See, that's fun. Like you have someone who goes to Egypt and pretends to be Hegelian but makes an ass of themselves being a Hegelian. Be like, look, Hegel, if what you're saying is right, you're making an ass of yourself. Well, I mean, all of philosophy is depressingly racist. It's not like that's special. Well, this is why we're reading the paper, Shane. I mean, this is a critical notice of a new book. So, the philosophical Ibsen. So, someone has, Kristen Gestall has reinterpreted Ibsen and some of the works. And so, I don't know if that may be entirely true, or they may have some sort of, axe to grind. Yeah, so this is what... Well, they're philosophers. They're reading too far into it. That's not the question. But the question is, do they have an axe to grind? And is that their axe, or is it accurate to the play. And so, whatever. But we don't know. But like, this is what the article's about. You think the moderns might be particularly bad? I mean, why? Why do you think we're worse? They were worse than like other times in history? Because I mean, when we look back at it now, is it like why should we hate on them more than other time periods? Like, have we learned more from them, or have we like, were they so? I mean, like, other cultures and times somehow better than like the moderns? I mean, I just don't know. Like, I tend to think we're all basically pretty similar over time, and there were some bad spots every so often, but I don't think like blame the time period. That's not a bad idea, Valpo. We could do the 1,000-word philosophy. Shane says, Peer Gynt was Ibsen grinding an axe against how hidebound and insular the Norwegians were at his time. Well, that's interesting because they're basically, the author here is saying it's not the, they're saying it wasn't the Norwegians, but Hegel that was really the target. So that's possible. Like, that Ibsen was angry at the Norwegians, but also possible that Ibsen was, poking at Hegel a bit. So I don't know. I don't know the play well enough. You met the author at a conference last week. Oh, cool. That's fun. I hope they were nice. Yeah. I forgot about 1,000-word philosophy. I should go look at that. Because that would be good for this forum here. Like, the way I do things. Okay. Emperor and Galilean centers on the Roman Emperor Julian the Apostate, who rejected the Christianity toward which... I don't know. What did I eat for dinner tonight? Is burping too much. The reason he had Peer travel around was to poke fun of Norwegians and all these different situations on his trip through Europe and Africa. Cool. Well, see, again, the author here is saying that they had Peer travel around to poke fun at, like, the Hegelian view of stuff. And so it's like, again, what you and the author here are saying, Shane, might not actually be at odds. It may just be that we were missing the Hegelian angle up until this person pointed it out. It may be that they were poking fun at the Norwegians, but they were also, drawing on Hegelian theory to say, look how wrong this is. So more than one thing could be happening. Yeah, it's the old thing, Valpo. There's the old logical joke. If I had more time, I would have written a shorter paper. It's so hard to write concisely and well that, like, anyone who can pull off a 1,000-word philosophy has to have at least some philosophical chops. And hopefully, yeah, you say they were great. That's good. Okay, so yeah. Emperor and Galilean centers on the Roman Emperor Julian the Apostate, who rejected the Christianity towards which the Roman Empire had turned. Ibsen scholars have viewed the plays as Hegelian, but they base this reading on seeing it as exemplifying a dialectical structure, and this is an interpretation that Gestalt resists. So just because it's dialectical doesn't necessarily make it Hegelian. That's true. Julian lives in a period of transition and uncertainty. Yeah, I remember him talking about that one, Valpo. They were, like, really hardcore about their editing. So, like, it's, like, super hard to write, short stuff and well. And, yeah. So Julian lives in a period of transition and uncertainty in which Christianity offers no sustenance, but neither does the beauty of the pagan world either. To quote an apt expression of this sentiment from the play, the old beauty is no longer beautiful, and the new truth is no longer true. Julian is a tragic figure, but one, like Hortus, with a distinctively modern predicament. In the wake of Christianity in decline, 19th century figures, including Hegel and Nietzsche, looked to the Greek world for earlier alternative conceptions of, broadly speaking, religious life. But these are no longer accessible to us, and moreover are not suited to the modern era. A point in Hegel, if not Nietzsche, surely would have acknowledged. Christianity marks an inward spiritual turn, which paves the way for modern subjectivity, but which makes the Kunstreligion of the Greeks, as Hegel terms it in the phenomenology of spirit, no longer an option for us. Yeah, because, I mean, it's so hard to reach back to that long to really believe as they did. I mean, how could we do that? We can't do that. Emperor and Galilean dramatizes the impossibility of a return to the pagan religious forms of the past, and thereby is a criticism of this 19th century ambition. Julian's staging of a return to the past, his retrieval of what has sunk, is a contorted farce. So that's interesting. It's like looking at that past in the sense that like you're looking to the past, but in some sense it's completely lost to us. Like we can't jump the gap back to the Greeks as much as we would want to sometimes. Like we can look at what they said and try to figure it out, but we can't really jump the gap and get back there. So the art religion, if I remember my German, interesting. Okay. Yeah. Kunstreligion, art religion. Okay. Yeah, this is one of my failings, is I do not know anything other than basically English. Okay. Thank you, Shane and Valpo, for telling me. Yeah, so this is a question of history. Is like how much, like this is like a serious general question, and I mean Shane, I'm sure, has dealt with this more, but like there's a gap between what we understand now of things and what people understood before. Like we understand when we deal, like philosophers deal with this when we're reading Greek philosophy or like ancient, Chinese Confucianism. We're trying to understand a world that no longer exists and is very different from the one we exist in now. Very, very different. And so we're reading this stuff and we're trying to translate it into modern concepts, and it's just not going to work all the time. And so how well can we actually do that? And if they have something to say, how, like, are we even, like, getting what they say? Yeah. Well, I've not read these plays either. I should, this is like one of, like, again, I should read more literature too, so. But yeah, this is the relativity of, like, cultures. Like, how do we actually, there's no guarantee that we actually understand anything of what is going on in, like, some other culture sometimes. The gap may just be too far in some sense, that what they're saying we're just not getting. We're interpreting it in a meaningful way, but we may not even be getting close enough to what they meant. And there's always funny things. I bring this up every so often, is the Greek concept of color is just completely foreign to us at the moment. Maybe they couldn't see green or yellow because they never talk about that. They couldn't distinguish between green and yellow. The wine dark sea, was the ocean a different color back then? Was wine a different color back then? Did they not distinguish between like a reddish purple and a blue? We don't know. And it could be that all the Greeks at that time had, a genetic thing about their eyes that they couldn't see. They were all colorblind in a certain way. We would have no idea. And it has a lot to do with the evolution of language. Yeah, absolutely, Shane. But, like, this is the problem. We just can't tell. Like, there's so many things that could be wrong about this that it's like, there's no way to, like, fix it. They aren't genetically any different than us based on DNA evidence. I believe it, but the problem is, like, how do you explain that they never seem to distinguish between certain colors that should be obviously distinguishable to any non-colorblind person? And, like, we don't really know. There is no way they didn't see or talked about green as there in Desert Arabia. Well, that's the problem. They're on the Mediterranean. They've gone all over, like, the Middle East. Like, they traveled around. There is no way that, like, they didn't experience what we think they experienced. But, like, then why did it never get said in any literature, like the same sort of color ascriptions that we have? And there's no answer to that. Like, there is no answer to that we have at the moment that makes any, we may never actually understand this, because if they were describing colors in a different way than we understand colors, like they were philosophically different, could we even, you haven't seen a tree in 3 years? Oh, jeez. Yeah, you're, yeah, so, like, that's the thing. Like, there's a tree right there. I can see it. Yeah, there's different parts of the world. It's like, that's how things are. But, like, what was I saying? Like, if their philosophy of, like, how they describe color was significantly different from ours, then maybe that's why they describe things a certain way, but we don't have enough of their phenomenology of color to talk about that. Yeah, drought. Oh, God, that's terrible. So there's a deep-ass field of linguistics that deals specifically with color words. As of a few years ago, there has been conclusive publication that deals with this stuff. Really, because I was talking to people, pre-pandemic, and I had mentioned something about this, and they were saying they had looked at it, at least from the philosophy side, and we still, I hadn't heard anything. This must have been in the last 10 years, because I know 20 years ago there was no answer, but that's getting on a little bit of time now. Oh, cool. That'd be nice. But, you want to know something? The things the linguistics are going to say may not actually cover the philosophy of it. I wouldn't be surprised if it got close and if they said stuff, but I can't really understand how they couldn't distinguish between, there's, obvious color differences that they should be making. Wine dark sea does not make sense to us. Does light and dark mean something different then? Are you saying, the ruddy color? But, again, they should be able to, just make, we should just get a random an offhand, description of something that has a color. Yeah, but that's the thing. We have enough fucking literature from the Greeks that you think something would just be called yellow once or twice. The difference between green and yellow. Sure, whatever the thing was. Something, we have their plays. It feels like, yeah, but, that's the whole point. The one that, there's certain distinctions that is blue and cerulean. Cerulean is a kind of blue. This is not yellow is not a kind of green, or whatever it is. Orange is not a kind of green. This is not something you're getting more specific about when you call something cerulean versus blue. This is something that this is not the same color. It really ain't. So, that's the problem. We're not the philosophers aren't crazy about this. They understand the difference between shades, or a very specific shade versus a more general concept color. Yeah. What do you mean? What's your theory? They saw green, but it was never written? That's the question. No one really understands DeMarshall. We don't get it. We assume they saw green, and they saw yellow, and they saw blue, just like everyone else. We do not understand why they never mention certain colors ever. Okay, let's see. MIT Ideas 2017. Let's see. Oh, okay. So that people can do it, but we can communicate it certain ways. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through this article that Shane just sent. I'm trying to see, if there is interesting things. In a new study, cognitive scientists have found that language tends to divide the warm part of the color spectrum into more color words such as orange, yellow, and red compared to the cooler regions, which include blue and green. This pattern, which they found across more than 100 languages, may reflect the fact that most objects that stand out in a scene are warm colored, while cooler colors such as green and blue tend to be found in backgrounds. The wiki page... Oh, hey, Nintendo. What's up? The wiki page for Wine Dark Sea is really interesting. I haven't looked at it in a while, but I think I've seen. I don't even remember last time I looked. But this is the point: is that I'm not sure what the hell's going on with this. So okay, this is interesting because this is gonna go to the argument that maybe we just don't have enough Greek sources to say that maybe they just really rarely made the distinction because why not? Maybe it was just more interesting to make certain distinctions. The problem is, Aristotle was a scientist. He was big into making all these distinctions. The idea that these people who were in the academy and weren't talking about color, it just seems weird that they again did not do it. All right. Oh, interesting. The great deal of variation in the way colors are described by members of an Amazonian tribe. less agreement about them naming colors such as blue, green, and yellow. Interesting. So let's see. They cause for surprisal how different people describe it. Huh. Now, color chips labeled in different things were all ordered by color. Okay. So warm colored and cool colored chips. So maybe what is going on here is that many more chips people call blue than there are chips people call yellow or red. So it's saying that basically they just did not distinguish back in the past. I'm having a trouble, but again, the Greeks were not some tribe that didn't write stuff down. This was not like these were like scientifically minded people who were doing complicated things that were trying to explain stuff. And so the idea that like these people in Bolivia didn't make the distinctions interesting, but like the idea that it's hard to like talk about like the Greeks not making these distinctions though, because they wrote down lots of stuff. They had super sophisticated sort of things. And so the idea that like they never made no one in like the history of like Greek literature made this like distinction, it makes it harder. Now, this article here makes it sound like, okay, it's more reasonable that maybe they had fewer words and so they were a little lackadaisical calling things blue or green. But again, like, yeah. All right, now let's look at, but thank you, Shane. That's like super interesting stuff, really. Oh, so we've got a more, not a pop article. This looks like PNAS. Copy link. There we go. What do we got here? Reflects color use. All right, let's read the abstract real fast. What determines how languages categorize colors? We analyze results of the World Color Survey of 110 languages to show that despite gross differences across languages, communication of chromatic chips is always better for warmer colors than cooler colors. We present analysis of color statistics in a large databank of natural languages curated by human observers for salient objects show that objects tend to have warm rather than cool colors. These results suggest that the cross-linguistic similarity in color naming efficiency reflects colors of universal usefulness and provide an account of a principal color use that governs how color categories come about. We show that potential methodological uses with the WCS do not corrupt information theoretic analyses by collecting original data using two extreme versions of color naming tasks in three groups. The Tzimane, that's the remote Amazonian hunter-gatherer isolate, Bolivian Spanish speakers, and English speakers. These data also enable us to test another prediction of the color usefulness hypothesis, that differences in color categorization between languages are caused by differences in overall usefulness of color to a culture. In support, we found that color naming among Tzimane had relatively low communicative efficiency, and that Tzimane were less likely to use color terms when describing familiar objects. Color naming among Tzimane was boosted when naming artificially colored objects compared with natural objects, suggesting that industrialization promotes color usefulness. Shane says what's specifically interesting is that they develop a specific pattern of color word development. Black and white always show up first, then warm colors like red, then yellow. See, it's interesting. But see, here's also the problem that I was trying to say before. It's that the communicative efficiency here. And it's just like I'd have a hard time saying that the ancient Greeks, with their very sophisticated culture, were so did not have a sophisticated color theory also. So maybe a lot of their writing is in this like sort of the efficiency thing. So I mean, this is like super interesting that they have this color usefulness hypothesis matters, but it just seems strange then that the Greeks, with all their sophistication, all their mathematics, and all their culture, did not have more sophisticated color schemes. What about the Romans? I don't know about the Romans, DeMarshall. That's a good question. Yeah, I don't know what their color schemes were like. And that's a good point, because if like similar cultures at the same time had the colors, then you'd think, why don't the Greeks? Because these were people that, the Greeks were interacting with. The Greeks were interacting with the Egyptians. The Greeks were interacting with the Romans. The Greeks were interacting with all sorts of people. Oh, that's true. Homer was much earlier. Yeah, that's a good point. That's an earlier phrase, a much earlier phrase. So that's a very good point. Oh, let's see what wine dark sea looks like. Yeah, Homer. Okay. Alright, so yeah, we've got like modern theories, and I bet this, yeah. Okay, so there's just interesting stuff. So different colors. So, Bronze Age pre-written word really might go back that far. Well, that's fair. Then you're really getting back into the times where that article, basically, this sort of stuff would have come into play, where color ascriptions would not have mattered. But again, why wouldn't the rest of the Greeks have like said something about it then? You just expect that like I said, that the Greeks would have done something at a certain point. But maybe if they didn't need to, or I don't know. But okay, that actually if you're looking back far enough, back when the Greeks were basically pre-sophisticated society, maybe then they had less use for sophisticated color distinctions. Okay, learned something. Thank you, Shane. Appreciate it. But let's get back to Ibsen real fast. So yeah. But like, yeah, color theory. This is why I also like when I've read a bunch of papers here on Roulette about they weren't even speaking Greek when the Mycenaeans were around. Well, I'm sure like the pre-Greek people were different. Yeah, different language. Yeah. I mean, the Greeks showed up. I don't know when they showed up, but like they came down like there were other people around before that, and like living in the area. What was I just gonna say? Forgot already. Dagnabbit, it's gone. Yeah, they weren't even speaking Greek. They had different language. Yeah, I can't remember what I was gonna say. Okay. Anywho, Ibsen. Yeah, I'm annoyed. I can't remember. Anyway, in A Doll's House, Ibsen moves from the domain of shared history into the domestic quarters of the nuclear family. Yet the play, in its way, concerns history as well, specifically the bonds inherited through tradition and the need to negotiate and break with these. Well, yeah, sure. I mean, any of these historical writers might not ever have existed the way we think of them. In particular, it is about a woman needing to find a space for new possibilities of living outside the bourgeois roles of wife and mother. Nora must escape the aesthetizing attitudes of Torvald Helmer that reduce her to a doll in a doll's house, a pretty little pet as he calls her. As with Peer Gynt, Gestalt reads Hegel against Hegel. Hegel's conservative views on the family, expressed in the philosophy of right, can face some pressure if we spin out his ideas of Bildung in a particular way. Hegel's work also entertains a model of experience and Bildung that point in a direction that transcends his views on the family. Bildung allows for a model of self, a model of experience that permits new modes of life to open up. Nor seeks the kind of self-education and change that will disclose new historical spaces. Ghost in 1881 concerns an upper-middle-class family as well. Mrs. Alving's son Oswald has returned in a sickly, syphilitic state from a long sojourn abroad, most recently an artistic life in Paris. So the dude was fucking too many women, he got some syphilis, and now he's sick. That's not good. As the drama unfolds, or Ben, I don't know who he was fucking. As the drama unfolds, we see the backstory of the Alvings' past. The deceased Mr. Alving was a drinker and far from a model father, and his looming specter is foremost among the titular ghosts. Oswald, we learn, was sent away to escape from him. The polished surface of the Alving home masks layers of pain and injustice. Gestalt argues against a reading of Mrs. Alving as the tragic protagonist, a Sophoclean figure coming coming to a tragic recognition of, as one interpreter suggests, her failed duties as a wife and mother. Gestalt looks at the work through a different, more emancipatory lens. The spotlight is on the life-transforming force of art, and this is more pronounced in Miss Alving than in Oswald. The latter sought to embody certain Nietzschean ideals of life affirmation and creativity, but without much apparent success. Miss Alving, as a reader, glimpses the truth that Oswald had sought to live by, that of life affirmation and joy. Like Nora, Miss Alving needs a path of Bildung that will allow her to escape the repressive force of social norms. Hedwig Dohm, a feminist writer and early exegete of Nietzsche, uses the metaphor of the ghost to show the way conservative mores oppress women. Gestalt's reading is a thought-provoking adjustment, showing greater continuity between Mrs. Alving and Nora Helmer than was previously apparent. Okay, so this is interesting. So it looks like there's some, the way the author here is putting it, the Gestalt, that is, Gestalt in the book is trying to, hammer on a few Nietzschean and Hegelian themes and interpreting Ibsen in terms of those. And the question is, are these the right interpretations, as Shane was asking earlier, because you could look at it without the philosophical influences or the philosophical strands. I don't know. But the fact that you can do it might at least, even if it, this is the sort of thing, even if it's wrong, it doesn't mean it's not interesting. And so the idea that the book is doing this, it may be interesting because it was of the time period. And so even if it wasn't intentionally against Hegel or Nietzsche, maybe it still has something to say because it was happening, around the same time in the same milieu. So rare I get to say milieu. Okay. In An Enemy of the People, Ibsen explores the theme of willful blindness to facts and science and attempts, well-meaning but perhaps going too far, to intervene and correct this ignorance. Also, even if Ibsen wasn't doing it consciously, it might be a social reflex. He just said, well, stream delay, what are you going to do? In an age of anti-vaxxers and anti-maskers, QAnon conspiracy theorists, Capitol stormers, and the like, this all seems very timely. Yeah, I mean, these things come back and forth. Its protagonist, Dr. Stockman, zealously resists groupthink and reliance on received opinions, and he launches harangues against the other townspeople. As far as the facts go, Dr. Stockman is in the right. The town's water is polluted, but this water is also particularly crucial to the town's economy. Convalescents come to its baths to be healed, but in reality they are made sicker. The town refuses to accept this and turns on Stockman, and he on them. He comes to see not just the water, but the populace as polluted, with, in his words, the whole civic community being built over a cesspool of lies. There is thus a similarity between Stockman and Nietzsche in that both reveal uncomfortable ideas and generate opposition in doing so. George Brands, one of Nietzsche's early interpreters and champions, noted this affinity with Stockman and particularly emphasized an elitist dimension. Only a select few have the mettle to face the facts. The herdish masses do not. Gestalt worries about the political echoes of these Nietzschean elitist ideas, the idea of the exceptional individual and the disdain for democracy, particularly in light of Nietzsche's reception of National Socialism. Gestalt notes, Nietzsche's Scandinavian reception included those who defended democratic rights, as well as those artists and intellectuals who were attracted to the idea of the exceptional individual. And Ibsen is not clearly on either side. Gestalt emphasizes a middle ground centered on education, responsibility, and nuance. Ibsen's dramas avoid didacticism, but open up an important space for critical reflection in a Nietzschean spirit, showing how our unexamined beliefs and the baggage we take over from tradition shape collective as well as individual lives. Okay, so this is interesting that they're trying to, say, look, you can be exceptional, but you can't get rid of you're still in a community. So it's and what you do and what you're taking on will shape how we view the community as well as the individuals. I mean, that's cultural tradition. It's gonna do something to the person and to the groups. The groups are gonna act in a certain way because that's how people understand groups. It's not they don't act on their own. They act in the society. The groups are not somehow have their own will entirely. Okay, The final play that Gestalt treats is Hedda Gabler. Previous interpretations looking for echoes of Nietzsche have long seen Lovborg as embodying the Dionysian. This comparison ends up being rather thin and forced. More promising Nietzschean interpretations have looked to Nietzsche's reflections on history in the Untimely Meditations. One version of the latter reading sees Tasman as the antiquarian historian and Lovborg as a critical historian. While in the right direction, this interpretation, Gestalt argues, ends up sidelining Hedda and being somewhat Procrustean in its understanding of Lovborg. Gestalt instead sees the more important contrast as between scientific history and history in the service of life. It is not, however, a work of simple archetypes. Gestalt's plausible suggestion that the work does not so much exemplify a single philosophical position, but instead dramatizes philosophical and existential possibilities. Most of all, we see Hedda trying but failing to live out the notion that the ideals of history can support and sustain the present. The loss of an inspiring historical horizon becomes a tragedy in itself. Okay, so this is the failure of history. That's kind of interesting. I haven't heard too many things saying, look, that history, well, you get this quite a bit, but that history has failed us in preparing for like the way the world is now. And something you get this in the sci-fi, where like our history has completely failed us in dealing with the new technological future. So this is interesting, though, that this is coming here. And so you can see, like, yeah, we've got scientific history. So this is a technological history versus the history of life and how it is to live. So this is why you get a cyberpunk. You take offense to this? Well, that means the philosophers are doing their job. I mean, the fact that someone has completely interpreted this rightly or wrongly, very differently from other people, means at least they've had perhaps a thought. We'd hope so. Now, they may just be wrong, of course, and like the author here, their interpretation of Gestalt and Gestalt themselves may just be wrong. But this does happen. I went to see Othello. I saw a performance of Othello in New York City, not on Broadway. It was at one of the schools, but like they had tried to take the race relations out of Othello, and you're trying to prepare people. You can't force them to listen. But I'm the voice of one calling in the wilderness. Okay, yes, you stand fighting against. You can be the good doctor from up here. You can be Stockman or whatever it is. And you could be the enemy of the people. You're Dr. Stockman. But anyway, they tried to reinterpret Othello without the race relations. Like Othello was no longer black. He was white. And like other people were black. And the play it doesn't work the same. They tried to make it work. And someone got up before intermission, walked out booing loudly in the audience. Like an old dude got up and booed as he got out and as he left. Like, I've never even considered that like a possibility, but someone got up, boo, and walked out going boo, and yeah, and this had like a famous actor in it too, like one of the very famous movie actors and play actors. What's that guy's name? Rusty in Twister. And he was in a lot of good movies, but of course I remember it like Rusty from Twister, Dusty, whatever it was. It's all about the suck zone, man. But like, yeah, like that guy was in this. So like, we're not even talking about like a crappy production. This was like a production, like a good production at like a university with like a top actor and like good people in it, trying to do something new, and someone got up and booed. So I think the real way to re-emphasize Ello is to make it clear that Iago is either gay or bisexual, is actually in love with Othello. Oh wow, I've not heard about that interpretation. That would be kind of fun. Yeah, that would be different. That would be so much different. Yeah, so something else is going on entirely in the undercurrent. That would be interesting. Yeah, but like you can be the one person being like boo. And like I was saying boo earns. Okay, but yeah, so like this sort of, this thing on the comment on Hedda Gabler, like we're getting this in the cyberpunk history. We've got like the scientific sort of trajectory of life, and like the history in the service of life, where like the humans are kind of passed by when we're looking at science. Yes, I saw Philip Seymour Hoffman live in Othello. That's correct. I mean, there are benefits to being in New York. Oh, have a great stream, Anne. If anyone doesn't know, you should probably go hang out with Anne afterwards. Yeah. So, head over there. Have yeah, give me a lurk. Go over, hang out there. No, don't. But well, maybe if you want. But yeah, yeah. So I saw Philip Seymour Hoffman in Othello. I think it was at NYU. Yeah, I think it was at NYU. So you can look. You can, if you want to go look it up. Like you can find that out whenever that was. Yeah, and I actually saw Philip Seymour Hoffman. We were having lunch, and he was sitting at the next table over. And did we say hi to him? I think we said, like, my dad went over and said hi once. It was a long time ago now. Anywho. In the Hedda Gabler chapter, as well as several others, an important emphasis, fittingly given Ibsen's excellent characters, is on the place of women. Hjordis, Helene, Alving, Nora Helmer, in addition to Hedda Gabler, are all exemplary in this regard. Ibsen's female characters do not long for the impossible. They long for a world that they can meaningfully inhabit and call theirs. A world that is, in this sense, both historical and new. Ibsen, as Gestalt convincingly shows, is in certain respects ahead of his time, and ahead of both Nietzsche and Hegel, at least in their dominant voices. Okay, I mean, I don't think it's that hard to be ahead of Nietzsche and Hegel in feminism, though. But, I mean, that's still good for Ibsen. I guess at the time, it was still something. These women characters are all the more bold and admirable because of the historical position they find themselves in and trying to negotiate. And that brings me in direct... Yeah, thank you, DeMarshall. And that brings me indirectly to my final question, one of staging and, as we might call it, modernizations in staging. What's up, Retheus? How are you? Hope you're well. Having a good night. Hopefully. We've just been reading this thing about Ibsen, actually, and it's his relation in his plays to Hegel and Nietzsche. Okay, but we're almost done. Good. Happy to hear that. In the illustrations included with the book, Gestalt includes a picture of the Nora played by Ann Tismer in Thomas Ostermeyer's much acclaimed production of A Doll's House, titled Nora, at the Schaubühne in Berlin. Gestalt mentions the production, Hegel adjacent. That's why we're reading it. I figured people would like it. Well, this is not that crazy. Gestalt mentions the production but does not comment on it at length. This is a more avant-garde rendition, clearly in the German tradition of Riga theater, of which Ostermeyer is a celebrated exponent. There is a picture as well of another Ostermeyer production, in this one of Hedda Gabler, where the interior has a stark modernist look, the sort of mise-en-scene for his Nora too, apparently, not a cozy bürgerlich room of paneling and velvet cushions. Ostermeyer wants a grittier doll's house that confronts the audience. Nora, for example, doesn't simply live here, but rather shoots Helmer. No, doesn't simply leave, but rather shoots Helmer. Current staging practice, at least in this German mold, tends not to be bound by the original setting of the work or the details of the playwright's stage directions. But how, I want to ask, does this square with the historically situated dimension of these dramas and their concern with history, to which I think Gestalt rightly draws attention? What implications does this concern for historicity have for what we make of the works today? This, of course, raises larger artistic questions about theater, but ones that are very much in the spirit of Gestalt's project about how drama can stage philosophical ideas and engage with history. Norway sounds like his real name is Norgorel, but he's British, so people come with a soft G, Norhe. Okay, interesting. Yeah. Well, as far as my name goes, I always tell people, say my name as you will. No. I don't think that's it, Retheus. This is sort of this is not a paper on Hegel, on Nietzsche, and Ibsen. This is a paper discussing someone else. This is just a critical notice, but it was like a fun topic, so I figured we'd read it. So this Gestalt, I guess, they wrote this book sort of interpreting Ibsen in terms of Nietzsche and Hegel. And so now she's asking, what is it that people are starting to change the historical context when both Hegel and Nietzsche were much more historically minded. I don't think they're going for logic here. I think they're asking where is the history going, and like how do we understand history. So, but we'll see. I mean, you might be right. I've gotten things wrong in the past, and I'll get them wrong in the future too. Okay, with most great and lasting works of art, there is, we usually think, some important degree of universality of time. Evolve yourself. What's up? What's up? What's up? How are you? And my Stream Deck decided it was going to shit itself right as you showed up. But yes. If everyone out there should go follow Evolve Yourself. He's a great streamer. He does some philosophy, also does a lot of meditation, chess on his stream. So it's like you get like a mix of like these sort of mind body things. It's like really good. A mix of just different ways to engage yourself, to evolve yourself, as it were. So you got like health talk, you've got like mind talk, good stuff. Also analytic philosophy trained, philosophy mind, metaphysics science, good stuff. Check them out. So yeah. Oh. Yeah, so we're just talking about some Ibsen plays actually. We're reading a paper, basically just giving a critical notice about a book. So yeah. So with most great and lasting works of art, there is, we usually think, some important degree of universality in theme. Yeah, so this is what I think. Like, you might be thinking they're talking about logic, but they're talking about a different kind of universality here, Retheus. This is partly what accounts for their enduring appeal and allows for variability of setting. And yet at the same time, works of art are reflective and, of importantly, reflective on their time and place. Yeah, so we're back to place here. Like, there is something to the spot that they are in. With Ibsen, that would seem to be especially true, even when the works are not set in a time contemporary to his own. For example, the Vikings at Helgeland or Emperor and the Galilean. The themes they treat, as Gestalt shows, reflect Ibsen's own times and concerns. New productions like Ostermeyer's can read the works against the grain, push it, deconstruct it, and the like. Gestalt, I should add, seems to be in sympathy with this sort of dramaturgy. And perhaps it is a matter of trade-offs when it comes to staging decisions. But part of what makes a character such as Nora so strong and impressive is the decisions she makes given the context in which she finds herself. When that context is stripped away in staging and replaced with another, one worry is that we lose some of the intelligibility of characters, their motives, their values, and their horizons. A crucial Hegelian point is that we are situated social agents and that our identity reflects this position in history and the possibilities open to us. Yeah, dramaturgy, let's see, what's that word exactly mean? Usually that's drama. Yeah, so it's the study of dramatic composition, the representation of the main elements of drama on the stage. So, yeah. So that's what it is. But I hadn't actually heard that word in a very long time, so I was a little confused myself because I've heard it in video games. They were misusing it terribly, and I was like, "Oh, what's that mean again?" It's like, oh man. Okay, so the Hegelian point is that we are situated social agents and that our identity reflects this position in history and the possibilities open to us. Yeah, like at any given point, there are only so many different, well, it's not true that there are only so many different, but like if we look at it, we're only going to see so many different ways open to us. And so in some sense, we are not infinitely creative in our historical understanding. In some theater circles, the mantra for staging seems to be something in French. Everything is something modern. I don't know. There is a fear of what could be perceived as kitsch or twee, perhaps of anything smacking of historically accurate bourgeois setting, one from the past anyway. It is old hat for the cutting-edge Berlin theater crowd, a setting to be mocked as a dusty museum piece. A charge I've always found curious given what one would expect to be enthusiasm for the curatorial historical mission of museums. It's true. I mean, is that like such a bad thing to be all the way in the past? It's like that's the whole point. Presumably in Ibsen's time, staging would have been more traditional or naturalistic, to be sure, loaded in potentially problematic notions. It could be thought that a sort of displacement is necessary in order for there to be serious intellectual engagement with the work. But what does it say about society and its engagement with its own history that the play will likely be staged in Ostermeyer Regie style in Berlin, and almost certainly in a more traditional fashion if it is done on Broadway? Economics, yes, but there is more to it. Moreover, what is a more effective attempt to understand history throughout drama and grapple with it? The answers here are elusive and complex. Okay, it is fair. Like, if you're dealing with historically minded plays, moving the time period might make more of a difference for these historically minded plays. Now, the question is, if you have this reading of the plays, then it does make a big difference. If you have a different interpretation of what makes the play good, then maybe the setting is less important then. Gestall's book is already nicely structured in its 7 main chapters and passes the philosophical threads from Hegel to Nietzsche in a fluid way. But one place I would have liked more reflection and discussion is on the staged nature of drama. Many of Gestall's points, as with many discussions of drama, are ones that apply primarily to the themes, plot, etc. Gestall does mention the staging issues with Peter Gynt, Emperor and the Galilean, and directions for the bourgeois interior of the Helmer household. But in a longer book, this might have been a fruitful avenue to explore even further, particularly in light of the questions raised above. A key theme throughout Gestall's reading is Ibsen's modernism or proto-modernism, less as a specific style of drama, but as a worldview, as against readings that would stress his romanticism, nationalism, and the like. While this is illuminating, it raises the question of to what extent the bourgeois Europe of today is like Ibsen's and its mores and concerns. There are similarities as well as considerable differences. These staging issues help to bring into sharper relief. But Ibsen's themes continue to resonate powerfully today and to provoke us to philosophical reflection, as Gestall's book ably shows. Okay, there we go. And so this is good. So yeah, this was fun. I mean, we got to talk about, what makes a play interesting now and how does it actually, show criticism of Hegel and Nietzsche. Now, Shane McGinnis was saying he didn't buy the interpretation that it was criticizing Hegel at the time. It was more the Norwegian culture at the time that the play was criticizing. Now, the question is, could it do both? I don't know. Maybe it could, maybe it couldn't. But I mean, going back and trying to figure out exactly what, maybe you could look into it a little bit more deeply, look at more of the history, and maybe you could see more of the stuff. Maybe there's a commentary to be dug up somewhere, an interview where Ibsen was talking about either Hegel or Nietzsche or anything. And even if not, as we were saying also, it could be just in the air at the time that these were the ideas going around. So it's a nice way of if you're interested in theater and what theater could do for philosophy, represent philosophy, and how it can, show ideas and make commentary on the greater, situation that people are find themselves in. So it's this is good. Stupid thing. Yeah. And there goes the stream deck again. It's starting to bust on my last 2 times. I don't understand that. But anywho. So I think that'll be it for tonight. I don't think I can do another third paper because if I got into it, I'll be not I was dragged to a lot of theater when I was a kid. So I went to a lot of plays in New York when I was younger. I haven't been to as much now, but like my cousin acts, so I went to one of his plays not that long ago. My his dad was a comparative lit person, so he he wrote something on Shakespeare as his dissertation for his PhD. My uncle, that is one of my uncles. So I've been to a bunch of theater. I'm not a big theater person, but I've seen an awful lot of theater. Peter Gint or Dallas House are your 2 starting points. That's cool. DeMarcus says, gotten interesting in reading Ibsen, but I know I won't find those Hegel and Nietzsche themes. I know. Yeah, well, I mean, Shane's giving some suggestions, so it might be good. Yeah, so I've seen a lot of theater, actually. Well, yeah, last thing I saw was my cousin in a play, off-Broadway thing. I mean, of course, everything was shut down the last few years, so I haven't seen much there. Dagnabbit. Okay, whatever. I don't need that thing. Yeah, so that's it for this. Any further comments on this? Cause yeah, you can do a lot of. I mean, Cinesemiotics is in here right now, but he's a big movie person. And it's so you can do philosophy and get a lot of ideas into this sort of theater, movies, all this stuff. And so it's different ways. It's almost unfortunate that he wasn't here right now for this. So yeah, would have been good to hear his feedback on these plays. But anyway, but yeah, okay. I don't know if I have a whole lot more to say because it's not there's stuff to argue with on this paper. It's just how is this stuff what's the important ideas here? And the ideas were history and place and what exactly the place of history on our current situation. And that's Nietzsche, Hegel, and then Ibsen also in this vein as the author was arguing for. So overall, I'd say it's an interesting concept, but before I made any further judgment, I would want to know Ibsen's specific interaction with Hegel and Nietzsche. Well, they said at the beginning, Ibsen was born shortly before Hegel's death and was a contemporary of Nietzsche. And, what's it called? And so Gestall's book is also a window onto Hegel and Nietzsche's 19th century reception in Scandinavia and their place in literary and artistic circles. So it looks like a little bit of the background was given, but they didn't really talk about that much in this review. So it looks like they were talking about how people were talking about Hegel and Nietzsche at the time. But yeah. What's it called? It's always funny. Sometimes you hear and this is if Valpo's here, maybe he can comment on this, that people's reception in different areas was surprisingly big or surprisingly small. Apparently Kierkegaard was well known in certain circles around different areas. Oh, I don't know, Shane. That's the thing. I don't know. It's possible he did. We don't know. Yeah, so that's the thing. It's from what they said here, it yeah, I don't know. I think Nietzsche, I'm trying to remember some of his stuff. I don't think he had much uptake. But I don't remember why I think that. And like I said, sometimes certain authors have more uptake someplace else than where they want to have uptake. So, yeah, I don't know. It doesn't say, I don't recall, yeah, they never specifically said that Ibsen read at either of them. They just say Gestall reads the plays as taking up Hegelian Nietzschean themes. Ibsen spent a lot of time in Italy when he was writing. I don't know how Nietzsche and Hegel went in that time. Yeah, see, that's a good question. Did Nietzsche's influence go down to Italy, or did it go up to Scandinavia? When did Ibsen, when and where was Ibsen at the time when those things were coming out? So, Stupid things. I would bet that Hegel would have been something in Italy, considering they were in the process of unifying. Yeah, I mean, well, that's if anyone could understand Hegel, that is. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is what I liked about it. These, can't talk anymore. I'm losing it. But like the idea, like that these different views of history are coming together, and what people are doing about them. And like it's interesting that like these female characters have to like sort of make these sort of decisions about what is available to them and how do they deal with different kinds of history, like concepts of history, like what is allowing them to do what they want, what is available to them, and how they're being pushed by like different sort of like historical requirements on them, like cultural requirements, but then they want to do something else. So like scientific history versus the history in service of human life. How are we looking at history as opposed to the history as some sort of abstract progress of science? You were in Italy for the 150-year anniversary of Italy unifying. There were tons of parades and such. Oh, that sounds like fun. I mean, the Italians seem like fun people, so like, yeah, like they might have fun. I mean, everything I hear about Italy is that you don't expect them to like rush themselves, but like they seem to enjoy themselves. Yes, rush them. No, you do not try to rush the Italians to like get them to do stuff, though. Yeah, Ibsen's female characters do not long for the impossible. They long for a world that they can meaningfully inhabit and call theirs, a world that is, in the sense, both historical and new. They can be very fun. They are more accurately, who cares? Yeah, I get that. Yeah, like they can be like, yeah, why are we being rushed? Yeah, my friend said no one in Italy was ever on time. See, that's the whole problem. Like, I know I had a friend who was from Hawaii, and there was something called like island time, and I've heard this from other people. Island time is when you get there is the right time. Like if there was good surfing conditions, then you have to go surfing. It is not time to do work if it's like good surfing conditions, because that means you have to go. You're not late to your next appointment because your next appointment got automatically bumped because you had to go surfing. And so it's like it's not like you were late. It's that who cares about the appointment? You had to go surfing. Like that's more like that's the mentality, is that there are more important things than being on time, because on time isn't even a thing. Surfing's a thing, not being like some arbitrary, appointment thing. So, but like that's in some sense, this is the time. This is what I mean by the distinction here. History in view of the service of life. Like this is time in the service of life. Like you have to go surfing. You're not worried about the scientific like clock time. Yeah, like clock time is like, who cares about clock time when you have to you have to make time to go surfing. It's surfing time. It's not who cares what the clock says. So and well, there's the distinction, like why are we looking at history or time in these ways? So but I mean, these are good things to like philosophical like things you can do in plays, because you are in a play for a certain amount of time. All these things can be represented. Aris, what's up? How's I see I've been lurking your streams. Hi Iris. Been lurking your streams. It's good to see you that you've been streaming again. Let's see if I can get my shout outs going. Hopefully, yep, there we go. So no picture, but okay. Go check out Iris the Cat Goddess. They've been streaming with Talk to the Twizzard. And it's like it's cool. They got this call-in show and like they're doing fun stuff. Why do I think some cultures are more chill and some care so much about work ethic? Well, I mean, history is just like, it's just an accident of history. A lot of it. I don't know if that's not a good explanation. That's just saying it is that way. But I don't have like, it's not like there's a simple way to say, like, well, the reason some people are chill is because, well, they prioritize things differently. Again, that's just saying, well, they just like different stuff. I can tell you from, like, you know, I'm from East Coast US. I'm from New York. We've got the Puritans that, like, came down out of New England and has made, like, the United States crazy. Yeah, if only someone knew sociology and history. But no, well, see, I interpret these questions different than you. Like, I understand there's a history to this, but why are some people actually interested in, like, chill, and some are actually interested in ethic? Like, what is the aesthetics to that? That's the way I'm, like, interpreting the question. And I know there's, like, you could look at the sociology and history, but, like, I'm thinking, like, why would anyone care one way or the other? And it's because, you know, there are different goods, and I guess that is what it is. It's like, why are you attracted to certain things? It's like, well, there are different sort of goals you can do. And what is it, like, the view of the world that you have, like, sociologically and culturally inherited? It's this question of what is the good in the world, in some sense. Yeah. And so I think that's it. Like, you've got these people, like, coming down from the Puritans, at least around here, that, you know, you're trying to build God's kingdom, and if you're not doing that, you're basically failing at, like, what God expected you to do. So get off your ass and get moving. And, like, it's just sort of like this crazy mentality that you always have to be working. And then other people, you know, they appreciate different parts of their lives, and so it's like, it's not moving in this sort of, like, religious trajectory. You've got a different sort of trajectory about how life goes, and so it focuses on different parts of the life. Yeah. And so it's like, but there's still, like, either way, there's something, like, great in all these things. You'd rather with time respecting society than disrespecting me and waiting on time and waiting for him. Yeah. It's like, it's hard when it comes to, like, these big societal things, though. If you want to know more about that, I would suggest Max Weber's Protestant Work Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism. Yeah, and that's part of the thing. It's like, it got co-opted in this country, and this whole thing is it's very hard to make money and, like, get by without being, like, sort of overly obsessive about it. Tribal says, I don't respect the individual, only the hierarchy. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. It's like, you've got these sort of political structures that reflect all these things, and yeah, and you can, and all of them sort of have, like, different blind spots. And so, like, when you're in these, like, sort of tribal motions, like, modes, you don't actually have, like, individuality. You only have, like, groupthink. So, but that's the thing with, like, time. Like, what are you looking at? What sort of mode are we looking at here? Why are we what's the goal of society? Like, is it to chill out and go surfing, or is it to, like, you know, build big buildings? Because the two, just, like, you can't get them working. Bureaucratic hierarchies. Interesting. I did not realize that. Shane. Okay. I'm losing it. My brain is starting to, like, break down, basically. I can feel it, like, right over here. It's like it's just getting mushy. So, thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. Let's go see if we could raid in. Let's go see if anyone else is up.